I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. House Republicans held a roundtable on Monday to discuss inflation. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy hammered President Biden and Democrats for increases in the price of gas and other everyday goods. Take a listen to their event here.
Here with us as well. We have Ranking Member Brian Stile. Thank you for coming. Mr. Feenstra, appreciate it. Maria Salazar, thank you very much. Michelle Steele from the great state of California. We appreciate it as a colleague. And we have three other businesses here, and we'll introduce them in a moment, and I'll have the members introduce their small business here. But really what we're really talking about today is small business. And one thing that is just devastating to this country that is happening is inflation. And the problems that is happening under this Biden administration, the mistakes they are making. When you think just in the short time period of what they've been able to do, inflation that we haven't seen since the early 80s. And it's a regression. It's probably the most painful thing you could do to the entire country. It's a tax on everybody. But when you think about a small business that's just come through a pandemic, what's compounded upon that is the mistakes this administration made, but the number of regulations that they're putting on it. What they say it costs them about 11% more. Well, that's even more inflation upon them. And then the struggling to hire people. And we watched what the Biden administration did was actually paying people more to stay home than to work. So then you watch, I used to be a small business owner, but to go through this right now is probably one of the most painful times. The price increases and then the gas prices. We watched what the Biden administration did when they first came in, attacking the energy industry. What did they think the price of gasoline will get to? So every small business in there, it's a higher cost with regulation, higher cost of hiring somebody to work, higher cost for goods and services, and then your gasoline, compounding across this. That's why this economy is hurting. Many people believe we're already in a recession. I mean, that means 2 down quarters. We'll see that coming out of the end of June. But a lot of that is created based upon what the administration has been doing. And then compounded on that, the crime crisis. Think about what you're doing in your small business and what you have to expend on security and others that you haven't thought of in the past. And that's the discussion I want to have today. Because the one thing I've learned, have been a small business owner, there were 3 lessons that never left me. The first to work, the last to leave, and the last to be paid. And if you're the last one getting paid and government's making it more expensive, you're not making money, you're losing money. But you've invested everything into it. You just came out of a pandemic hoping it would be better. And then you've got higher regulations, higher gas prices. And in a small business, you really learn the economic responsibilities, but you can't just keep spending money. And that's what this government has been doing, propelling inflation along the way. And you can't leave. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You're not just clicking in. You're working this the whole time way of life. And so what I really wanted to do is talk to the members. I want to introduce them, hear from them, but then we've got 3 small businesses here. We want to hear from them as well and get input. A lot of you are working on issues such as this, and I believe Washington would do so much better had they listened to their district, and especially listen to the small businesses, because that's where people are being hired. That's the place of where growth is. And if small businesses are hurting and can't start more, the future doesn't look bright for us. But if small businesses can, the future is even brighter. And I first want to turn to you, Brian, because you're heading up not just on financial services, but you've got a ranking position on a subcommittee that the Democrats have created that they want to bring more of their socialist wing in. But you've been a very fresh voice in there to tell them what the reality is all about. So let's turn to you first.
Yeah, we've been diving in on the Select Committee on the Economy and pushing back against the liberal agenda that Pelosi and Biden continue to push. And small businesses are completely getting clobbered. You're spot on. And if we look at what the drivers of this, we had so many small businesses are being told by local and state governments for over 2 years that they had to close down. Mm-hmm. So that's where they come out of. Then they come out and labor participation isn't where it should be, meaning the number of people who are ready, willing, and able to work, what percentage of those people are actually going to work? The Biden administration kept that low by pumping in all sorts of unnecessary money into the economy. And so now we're in a situation where businesses are still looking for workers. We're still trying to get workers back to work. Inflationary pressures, though, keep putting pressure on these small businesses. And if you look at 2 aspects of this, I thought you brought up energy prices. That's spot on. We know about that when we fill up our cars with gas, but sometimes we don't always think about the hidden energy costs and inflationary pressures. I was talking to a local grocery store owner, talking about the diesel prices that it takes to get products from the farm ultimately to the grocery store. So when you see your grocery prices going up, a big chunk of that is the energy costs that are baked into your food. And so if we look through all of these small businesses, often that inflation to a consumer is hidden in the cost. It's often the energy costs. And this administration has just gone and attacked domestic production of oil and natural gas. And the final piece is because inflation is rearing its ugly head and the Biden administration refuses to address it, interest rates continue to move up, which means borrowing costs for small businesses is getting more and more expensive. So when a small business wants to invest in their company so that they can hire more people, bring people into work, pay them more, they're finding it more and more challenging because interest rates are going up. They're going up in large part because the Biden administration waited way too long to realize the problem, and they're still not taking it seriously.
You're right. And, anytime you analyze whether you want to open a business, you look at what are the energy costs to manufacturing and what are the labor costs. And he's just raised both of those. And Randy, you not only have you served, you come from a state that's kind of first in the nation when they make decisions, but more importantly from an agriculture and others, but you taught tax policy. And the proposal for these Green New Deal or their other plans are raising taxes, which is the wrong thing to do in this cycle that they continue to go for.
Yeah, you think about that. I mean, I talked to all people from Iowa. I traveled to all 39 counties, and they're in pain because of the inflation, because of the input costs. But not only that, they're fearful of what's going to happen as they look forward when it comes to stepped up in basis, capital gains, like-kind exchange costs, when it comes to tax increases. I mean, they fear this. And not only do they fear those tax increases, they fear the regulatory environment when it comes to waters of the U.S. and other regulatory issues that affect the agricultural community. And coupled with that, right, we also have dramatic input costs. When you look at ag and small business, as you talked about, Representative Style, is for farmers, it's the fertilizer, it's the input of diesel, it's an input of gas and diesel and pesticides and all these other things. And then on the other side is what's happening with the transportation, right? The supply chain. They can't get their goods downriver, whether it be river or on the river, whether it be on the train, whether it be hauling by a truck, right? There's such pinch points, they can't get the product to market. So there's a lot of fear right now in the breadbasket to the world, right? These are the start of where everything happens. The breadbasket to the world, where the producers are making corn, soybeans, cattle, hogs, and all this stuff, and they're seeing dramatic increases. And then they fear, can we stay in business? Coupled with all the regulatory environment, coupled with a possible drought. I mean, these are fearful times, and it's all because of a Biden administration that fails to look at all these problems, and it continues to spend out of control and doesn't do anything with inflation.
It was interesting. The Wall Street Journal had an editorial that said President Costanza from the old Seinfeld doing the opposite. It's almost every action he's taken. When you burden a small business with more regulations at a time and you spend more money than you have and you have government pay people more to stay home than to work, you're creating inflation. It's a spiral effect of what you talked about. And when you look at those farmers, they're making these contracts ahead of time, but their fertilizer costs more, their transportation costs more, and they can't make it up.
That's right. And then they're trying to hedge the market. But the problem with the hedge the market is they don't know what's going to happen with the drought. So you sell your corn ahead of time, you sell your cattle ahead of time, whatever. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah. Now, Michelle, you served a board of supervisors, but board of equalization. You dealt with a lot of these small businesses and the struggles. And unfortunately, we're both from California, so we've witnessed some of this ahead of time of what like Sacramento did. We know that's a mistake and that's wrong. What are you hearing back home?
So you're complaining about gas prices. In California, actually, we led the letter to governor to suspend the state tax. It's 51 cents per gallon. You still pay the highest in the nation because we've been paying over $6 per gallon. And some of the cities like San Francisco and Sacramento, they hit $9 per gallon. So think about that. So 51 cents. Instead of that this liberal policy makers, that they decide to raise gas state tax. So from July 1st, they are raising 3 cents. Even you get rid of state tax, we pay the highest in the country. And inflation, we have, I have about like 23,000 small businesses. Half the workers in my district were hired by these small businesses. We shut down more than 2 years now. So it's not just Biden administration, inflation and gas prices. California, we really have to get rid of these liberal policies because we cannot really pay $6 or $7. Orange County almost $7 per gallon. And you cannot even find the workers because government was just giving out free money without any plan. How are you gonna find the workers when they sit at home and watching TV? They make more money than they go out and find a job. So we really have to stop these liberal policies. And both sides, I'm not even talking about just Biden administration, but you know what, Governor Newsom's administration.
You know, there's no greater contrast here. You make a very good point. These states are pilot programs, right? And so the nation went through and the world went through a pandemic. But how did Florida handle it and how did California handle it? You make a very good point here. You know, the national average for gas is an all-time high, but in California it's much higher than that. 51 extra cents is added on for a gas tax, and then they want to add another 3 cents during this time period. No relief in effort. But they shut these small businesses down. I mean, they would come after you, and they still make it very difficult from that prospect. So they don't have some money saved around. They were investing even more. And then we contrast, Maria, with Florida, why you've done so much better and continue to go. We lost people, but people went there because of the pilot program about freedom, and you know from a small business perspective. But what are you hearing back home?
Well, I thank you, Leader, for putting this roundtable together. And right there on the screen, you have Susie Battle. And her shirt says, La Jefa, meaning the boss. And you said it, that she is the boss. She's the one who gets paid last. She comes in first. And she has a unique business, which is she sells ice creams in the middle of 8th Street. You know, it's the heart of the Cuban exile community.
That's where you took me, right?
That's right, yes. And he has this very big cone. I followed her trajectory, and I know her family very well. And she sells ice cream, which is milk, eggs, labor, and sugar. All that is through the roof. So I'm going to have her talk to us in a little bit. But, you know, I represent Miami, which is the ultimate melting pot. 70% of the business in Miami are minority-owned and are small businesses, 3, 4, 5, 10 people. In 2019, Miami was the city that had the highest growth for small business. 1 in 5 small businesses in this country is originated or created by a minority. So when Biden administration imposes this draconian laws and creates this inflation, all it is doing is killing the American dream. Because the American dream for an immigrant is to create your small business. It could be, right? It could be like a little dry cleaners, or it could be a ice cream shop, or it could be what? It could be a shoe store or a body shop. That's the American dream. And this administration is cutting it because they believe that government is God, and that God can do everything, right? Well, so does government. So they need to get out of the way. And we know it very well. I repeat, you know, I'm first-generation American. I know exactly what this promised land promises to the immigrant, and starts with your small business. So I know that I have to say some remarks in Spanish, but maybe later.
Okay. Well, let's turn to our small business here. I have Dwight Moshburn. He has a transportation service company. I can only imagine what he's going through there in California, but you can imagine transportation every day, the price changing, and you got to be moving. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's reflecting on your business and how you're handling it and what you're doing.
Yeah. So like you said, transportation, and specifically in oil and gas as well in California. Our fuel makes up 30 to 40% of our overall operating costs. And as you can imagine, that's almost doubled, which has made a big restraint on cash. When we get deliveries of fuel, we pay immediately. And as you can imagine, we don't get paid for another 30 to 60 days. So it's made a huge restraint on cash that we've been experiencing. You know, labor, there's always a Class A shortage of drivers. And this market has made it even worse. And so we are experiencing probably the worst times trying to hire Class A drivers, which is also raised our labor prices another 6 to 10% at least. And so as you can imagine, the only way for us to stay in business is to pass that down to our customers, which is just a chain reaction, right, that everybody else is experiencing from high cost of transportation. And then the other thing I was going to speak on too is, being in California and in oil and gas, we have some of the best and richest oil fields in the country, and the cleanest by far. And we work for one of the major companies, Chevron. And as big as they are, they can't even get a drilling permit in the state of California right now. So there's no new oil being produced because, the local government has pretty much locked it up and nobody's allowed to drill currently. And so there's a huge issue going on, and there's no solutions coming out of government right now.
The companies are seeing the regulations get denied. So here you go. Oil and gas, which California needs, the person who supplies the most oil is Ecuador. And you know who else is supplying it? Russia. Because what Gavin did, he shut down California American companies from producing it, where we could produce it right there. But the aspect, even for this large corporation, is the small businesses such as yourself don't get business then. And they're making it so burdensome to just get a simple permit to do what they were already doing. But people are still driving, people still need it, so they go to a place that is not environmentally sound as we are, and they're not American jobs. It just goes to show it's another bad decision that propels greater inflation. You all, Randy, you have a small business with us today too.
Yeah, I'm excited. We have a great small business, an agricultural co-op, and the gentleman that's been in the field, general manager for 39 years, Ed Wester, a close friend of mine, and I asked him to talk about the inputs and the inflationary costs that are hitting our farmers. So, Ed, I'd like to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being on today.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, and I want to thank you all for what you do there in Washington. And it goes unsaid that we need good people there to do good work. Looking at fertilizer prices for the farmer this past 5 years, from 2016 to 21, the prices were very stable, and it cost about $126 per acre to put on what I call a normal fertilizer to replace the nutrients that the crops take off. This spring, it was $226 an acre, up $100 an acre, and we're looking at projection of almost $300 an acre for 2023. Now, when you look at that, it's $170 an acre. The government's saying that our yield across the country is about the same, about 175 bushel per acre. So it increased the cost $1 a bushel when historically we're at 4, and now that just to break even on fertilizer would be $5, 25% increase. And that does not include the fuel. And like it was said by one of you there, that transportation and energy is such a big part of food production, both the inputs going into food production, but we're also dealing with commodities, which are a lot of volume, and to move that products and to get them to the markets and to be further processed, which takes more energy, is a big thing. So when we see the importance of food prices, when we're talking about shortage of baby formula, the country needs to be aware that some of these decisions that are being made on energy and on decisions on how we look at energy in the future has a direct impact and a tax, an inflationary tax on food and all the other basics that are out there. One of the things I pulled up, and I gave a copy of this, was the GAO report, and that, if you can read that, September 2003, domestic nitrogen fertilizer production depends on natural gas availability and prices. And that was nearly 20 years ago, and what happened in between then is we had fracking, which made the U.S. the #1 natural gas producer in the world, and yet we're still holding restrictions. My understanding is the natural gas industry wants more pipelines. They're willing to produce more. But I don't know if this administration would support that. The other thing is, the cooperative system has two oil refineries out of the 100 oil refineries in the U.S. and talking to their engineers, and I didn't know this, that the Keystone Pipeline, Keystone XL, when that was stopped, most refineries have to use a certain blend or viscosity of oil in their refineries, and they'll blend it from different sources. Well, the viscosity of the Canadian oil is very thick, but it needed the industry needed that to offset the very thin, light fracking oil in order to run refineries. So in stopping that XL pipeline, it was really in an effort to stop the efficiency and profitability of fracking oil. And the last thing is we're a cooperative. We work on 1% to 2% margin. We've been around for about 110 years. Farmers utilize us to try to do a good job of getting prices and supporting them and also marketing their products. But we're also an essential business. We did not shut down during COVID. But this past year, in 13 months, we had to raise our wages 15% to keep people working here on essential business. And that again goes into the cost production of the food and the cost to the country. One of the things right now, they say bacon's up 17% from a year ago, but the hog price that the farmers have raised is actually down from a year ago. So that gives an example of what's happening. So that's what I had.
You raised a very good point. The farmers are getting less, but the price is higher. You're doing on a 1% to 2% margin. When government puts more regulation on and more scarcity, you don't make that up. I mean, it's very difficult. So I appreciate your feedback and what you're talking about. Now, Maria, you talked a little bit about this small business. I've been to this neighborhood. It's a beautiful place, and it was an honor that you let me come there. But I mean, I can only imagine the struggles that they go through as a small business.
Because 70%, as I said, some of them do not speak English very well. They do not know the system. They know, though, that this is the promised land and that they're going to do a lot better here than back home. They may not have that many resources, like you're saying, a lot of regulations, and then they don't get paid. And now, as Susie, I'm sure, is going to tell you, now you have to pay more for the raw materials. She is making ice cream for the tourists. And the Biden administration has imposed that every tourist or any foreign national that comes into the United States needs to get a COVID test. We live off tourism. 80% of our industry is tourism. So if you cannot get on that plane, you can come to 8th Street and buy the little Cuban coffee or her ice cream. So we are trying to, this is another initiative of ours that we need to ask the Biden administration, please, to do away with that mandate so we can have more influx of people from all over Ecuador, Central America, Europe, the rest of the United States. So we're in love with American exceptionality, with the American dream, but we do not like the fact that some administrations are making it a nightmare, not an easy job.
So you want to introduce Susie?
Sure, Susie. Know her very well. She has this beautiful store with a very big sign, very Latin sign. Outside of her shop is a big cone, ice cream cone. And she started, 5 years ago? No one really thought that she was going to be able to make it. And there she was, working 24/7 and made it a very big, a point where you have to go to. Right now is the landmark for any tourist that goes to 8th Street to visit the Cuban exile community. And there you are. And the names of the ice creams are like very picturesque as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit more, Susie?
Well, certainly thank you for having me here. And definitely it's an honor to be here. And so I've been in business. Actually, this is going to be my 11th year. So being in Little Havana has changed a lot as time has gone by. But this year, most of all, it's crippling because we have gone 40% higher in just raw material. So even my farmers we go and purvey all of our fruits and vegetables in the Redlands, which is in Homestead here, which in Miami, and even that has gone higher. So forget about just the fuel to get, like, let's say, for instance, cups to me. So cups you could say are coming from California, they come from Mexico, but now they're like, it's impossible to even get the cups here. So imagine just everything from the milk, from the heavy cream, from the eggs, to the cups, to the spoons. Now we also have to pay our employees higher because of all of the laws that are continuing to come down. So big business could say at Starbucks, which is now opening, believe it or not, down the street, they could say, oh yeah, we're going to pay everybody, $15, $16, $17 an hour. When we have kids that are from high school, it's impossible to continue this uphill climb without raising prices. So last week we actually did raise prices, and I already lost one of the culinary tours to it. So I'm not sure where this is going, but it's very scary for small business to be in this situation, me and everyone. And I really am thrilled because I actually have another store in Dallas. So I was in the two most opportune states that were not closing. So yeah, we stayed open in Dallas and we stayed open in Little Havana. But Little Havana was, I mean, there was not one customer in Little Havana because it is a tourist-driven neighborhood. I mean, we do have some locals, but yeah, we lost our shirt, last year and the year before. So we were hoping that this year things were going to be different. And then in comes the inflation, in comes the Biden administration making moves that I really can't even understand. So unfortunately, for everybody in small business, we're going to have to pay the price. Whether we remain in business is another story.
Well, thank you for that. I want to turn to Brian if you want to ask a few questions of our small business based upon your committee there. Bring back some of the input that you've been hearing.
Yeah, I'd love to go back to the gentleman from Iowa, and because we're talking about food prices, and I think we all recognize we got a pretty serious situation in our hands with what's playing out with food in Ukraine from the national security standpoint, which makes American domestic production all the more important this year. As we look at those input costs, in particular on the energy side, I talked to farmers in Wisconsin who are filling up their tractors as they head out into the fields here in May, and diesel prices well over $5 a gallon. What that is doing to our farmers in the United States?
Well, I think part of the situation is farmers plan ahead. They have to plan ahead. So some of them, what we had this past year, they had pre-purchased and pre-bought. The issue is this coming year, and even if we're able to get fertilizer and inputs, is a concern for this coming year. And if the inputs get too high and the risk gets too high, then the farmers who make a decision on every acre of ground themselves have to decide if they're going to raise this crop or that crop, which might take less inputs, and that can essentially put a lot of pressure on the market. Now, you probably know India put a hold on their exports. They only export about 8% of their wheat. And so wheat market is up about 70 cents a bushel this morning. And so you're seeing a lot of protectionism as we get tighter on these grain markets, and then that just accelerates inflation and food costs. So we need open trading and we need cheap energy, and the farmers will produce. That's what they want to do. They'll produce. You just got to give them an opportunity.
I think what's important there, Leader, is that we realize as food costs, prices have a significant risk of going up as we head throughout this year, that it's the energy policies of the Biden administration today that are going to be driving up food costs for Americans as we move forward. I think that's one of the real damages of this administration, starting out on day one, killing the Keystone Pipeline. It's a huge portion of the inflationary pressures we're feeling. Farmers are borrowing at higher rates. And as all of these food costs flow through the system, when families go to the grocery store and they're seeing these higher prices to feed their families, it's the Biden administration policies that are driving up their food prices.
Yeah, they did a study, and they talk about it's more than $5,000 you're costing the average family because the price is going up. And then we hear from Susie that she has to raise her prices, and she loses business over it. Right. People have to make decisions. And, what's interesting, the Democrats here is their only answer is to spend more, to do the wrong thing in the process, to not make energy lowering the cost. I mean, he just shut down just the other day, a lease in Alaska that was opened up to be able to produce more. And then compound it with these more regulations after more regulations over one. I mean, you just heard from Ed and some of the things. Are you hearing from the farmers as well about it?
Yeah, I mean, they come to my forums and we hear it every day, the pain and the worry. I mean, just the worry of what the future looks like. And we just heard with India, not exporting any more wheat. I mean, these things just compound on each other.
This is a staple in our food process.
That's exactly right. And then you have the waters of the U.S. You have the EPA saying, hey, we're going to be punitive. We're going to fine you. I mean, it just never ends. And we're the breadbasket to the world. And yet the Biden administration wants to destroy the breadbasket to the world. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Yeah.
I think that we have a leader. There is some hope at the end of the tunnel. November, elections come, things for the American electoral system. The American people, regardless of the political party, they have popular wisdom. There is wisdom out there that people understand who is imposing this governmental regulations. And I am sure that the American people will reward the Republican Party. Now it's up to us to be responsible to bring back prosperity to people like the ones that we're interviewing right now.
Well, a lot of the work that we're doing is towards our commitment to America.
Right.
How can we curb the inflation that has been created? First, stop wasteful spending. Secondly, lower the energy cost. Everybody you heard here is what the problems. And God blessed America that we have a lot of natural resources. And what's so interesting is we look around the world and what's happening in Ukraine and what Russia has done tried to Europe. American natural gas is 41% cleaner than Russian natural gas.
Mm-hmm. Or China.
So if you're caring about the environment, you want America to produce it more as is. But Michelle, you brought out a very good point. The price in California is so high, and I've never seen somebody communicate with their district so much as you do. I mean, you're hearing it time again at the cost and how difficult this is.
It is really difficult. In California, they never gave out one drilling permit. We have over 1,000 waiting right now since 1994. We have oil well in California, and we really have to open up. This is our national security, and we have to be self-sufficient, and it's not done. And on the top of it, we have AB5, and I don't know why federal government tried to pass something that failed policy that California went through. And I think that gentleman from Bakersfield, that
Dwight?
Dwight, I think he felt exactly same thing because his trucks that you cannot even bring it in, any trucks built before 2010, unless you fix all the engine up to Environmental Protection Agency's regulation, you have to met. So this is like totally unheard of. California is worse. I've been talking about it. Biden administration on the top of our California administration. I mean, this Newsom administration. We really have to stop these liberal policies. If you are not giving any permits drill, then when are we going to get it?
Dwight, maybe you could touch on a little of the regulations that's been hitting you, compounding with the rising cost within California and others that you see within your business.
Yeah, we've, from regulation standpoints, not just in the oil and gas sector, which is kind of with everything when we have the cleanest oil fields probably in the nation and gets infrastructure to produce it probably the quickest. But even on the transportation side, we have CARB compliance. And so, we've basically retrofitted our entire fleet of about 130 trucks, which as you can imagine is not cheap to do. And it's a continuing snowball. And so, we don't know what's going to come next. So we've got to stay on our toes there from a regulation standpoint. And so it's really trying to keep up with it and then still trying to manage the business all at the same time with all these other pressures coming from, from inflation and fuel and supply chain and labor. But I mean, it really just goes back to energy, like everybody's saying. We have the resources here locally to produce what the country needs and quit importing it from other countries. And, we're not given the green light to do so, even though we're the best at what we do. And that's what's hurting us.
What did it cost you to retrofit when you have the air quality coming in and telling you that?
Well, first it was retrofit by putting aftermarket filters on the trucks, and so we did that, and that would cost anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 a truck. And now, as of 2023, those filters are no longer good, and we have to have brand new trucks with the OEM filters installed on them. And so, all of those trucks that we previously retrofitted and put $40,000 filters on, we are now going out, and if we can even find trucks, which is another supply chain issue, but we're going to go back out and spend $200,000 a truck just to keep our fleet going.
So you're being mandated in a time that a supply chain's tough, so you're making the supply chain worse, have to spend more money instead of investing in other places.
I think one of the things that's missed and clearly missed by the Biden administration is how the compounding impact of all these regulations, the impact that has at the consumer at the end of the day.
Yes.
So whether or not that's the
they pay
gentleman
for it.
fighting for his business in California and paying $30,000, $40,000, or whether or not it's what you brought up, Randy, with farmers, with Waters of the U.S., with the EPA's heavy-handed regulation. These regulations cost money for businesses to comply, and that cost eventually flows all the way through to consumers. And so when consumers are seeing higher costs, some of the higher costs that they're seeing is directly the result of heavy-handed regulations from the Biden administration.
Wouldn't it be, just on a philosophical basis, if you had a nation that was in the middle of a recession and had inflation going on, wouldn't you reverse the regulatory burden or give it a waiver from that place? Wouldn't economically that help the small business survive more?
But you know what's the problem, leader? That the Biden administration and the Democratic Party, and I feel very confident in saying this, they have been penetrated by neo-Marxists policies. You want to call them democratic socialism, fine. You want to call them progressive, fine. These are neo-Marxists, because when you are going against the system that has been established and that has worked for 300 years, then you have another type of ideology, which is not the American spirit. And that is the big problem that the American electorate is going to face in November and in 24. You could be more liberal. You could be a Democrat, and I'm sure that there are many noble people within the Democratic Party. But they are not. But neo-Marxism is what has hijacked the Dems, and you see it clearly, and we see it. I belong to the Foreign Affairs Committee. The moment, and this is an empirical evidence, the first moment when the Biden administration announced to the world that they were going to stop buying Russian oil, National Security Council advisor by the name of Juan Gonzalez, he's the one taking care of Latin America. He got on a plane and he went to talk to Nicolas Maduro. And he asked him, hey, could you sell some oil to us? Not really knowing or paying attention that the State Department official website had Nicolas Maduro as someone who was not the legitimate president of Venezuela. And on top of that, there's a $15 million bounty on his head. So how could you being the National Security Council advisor for Latin America, meeting with a guy that is not the legitimate president? What does that tell you? That there's an ideology that has penetrated the Democratic Party, or at least the Biden administration advisors, or the people advising the president, that are not, they do not have America at heart, or American interest at heart. Yeah. That's the problem.
Randy, you taught tax law and others. That's
the other part of it. So they want to pass Build Back Better, and what do they want to do? They want to dramatically increase the taxes on our small businesses and our farmers. Marxism. So what do they want to do? Yeah, stepped up in basis. All right, we want to tax if you transfer anything to your kids. Capital gains, we want to tax that. We want a right kind exchange. If you exchange your combine for something else, it goes on and on. And so all these farmers are looking at, okay, I got higher inputs, I got supply chain issues, I'm not sure what's going to happen because of weather, and now you want to tax me? I mean, these people, they're in pain, and that's why November. All right, we can make a change in November and stop all this.
The American people will make a change in November.
No, but look, I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to thank you for what you do. I remember when I started my first small business when I was 20 years old. You don't know what you don't know, but I mean, it's some of the hardest lessons, and you risk everything. You want to be an entrepreneur, and for government to fight you, and in a time like this, I salute you to get through it, and we'll do everything in our power to one, try to make it a little easier, because I believe small business is the backbone of America. It's where businesses are created, it's where jobs are created, it's really where entrepreneurship and investment is there. So thank my members, thank you, and look forward to continuing working with you.